Hello, this is the Inspiring Minds with Blissful Botanicals, where we holistically seek the truth in life using our entrepreneurial spirit. I'm your host, J.R. Knopp. Okay, everybody, I'm here today with Paul. Paul, tell us kind of who you are and what you do.
Hi there. Thanks for having me on. So I'm Paul Muchowski. My background is that I'm a scientist. So I spent most of my career actually working as a professor in medical schools, essentially running a big research lab. But so did that about half my career, published a whole lot of papers. And one of my friends actually discovered that your body makes endocannabinoids. And so he's a very close friend, and he said, you should be interested in this and you should start looking into this in terms of our research. And, long story short was that we ended up doing some research on the endocannabinoid system in the context of chronic brain diseases like Alzheimer's. And the research was really interesting. And so that basically led me to an interest in developing potential therapies based on cannabinoids for humans.
Okay. Well, let's take us a step back. Where were you a professor at? What school?
Yeah, so I was a professor at the University of Washington in Seattle for about 5 years, and then I
Okay.
got recruited to go to UC San Francisco. So,
Okay.
and yeah, I was there for another 7 years, and then I ended up leaving to go into doing research in basically biotech and pharma industry.
Working for the evil corporations. Oh, my bad. No, I didn't mean to say that.
Well, I did
So
that for a
Canada,
short time until I
sometimes
decided
you
to.
gotta get on the inside before you realize whoa, what the hell am I doing here? Like,
Uh,
this ain't
yeah, yeah.
my bag, people.
Oh, yeah. No,
Uh,
that's why I decided to start my own company.
okay. Well, so cannabinoids. Why don't you explain kind of what those are if people don't know?
Yeah.
Where do they usually find cannabinoids at?
So yeah, basically, cannabinoids are these small molecules that are found predominantly in basically cannabis and hemp, which are basically the same thing, actually. So for years, people used hemp, cannabis, historically for therapeutic purposes, like making oils out of the plants and use them as anti-inflammatory, things like that. People like me who are like nuts and bolts type scientists were interested in, well, what molecules are in there and what are they doing? And so the two that are most commonly studied are THC, tetrahydrocannabinol, and CBD cannabidiol. And so, we've mainly focused on those in our company.
Okay. So what is your company?
Yeah. So I run a company called
Yeah, well, let's dive into that. Let people know what company you
Sure.
got or what do you got out there?
Yeah, so I run a company called Defined Research, and we basically, at the moment, sell a single product called Defined Sleep, and it's a CBD-based product that's a little gel capsule that you take before you go to sleep, an hour before you go to sleep. And we basically spent years formulating this very unique novel formulation. Like we have our own secret sauce for it because besides the cannabinoids, we're also interested in other plant molecules called terpenes because we think these terpene molecules are important for medical purposes. And so we made this formulation, evolved it over years, and then spent another 3 years doing rigorous human clinical trials to see if it actually works and how it works.
Well, I would, it sounds like right up your alley. If you were in that profession and field already, this just seems like a smaller step into the, small business world. Like, hey, I'm going to take what could be applied in academia and put it in the real world and show, what people it can do, the
Yeah,
benefits of it.
yeah, you're spot on that. I mean, so here was my thinking when I got into all of this, that I was a firm believer that these molecules have good medicinal purposes. And I know a lot of people just use them as such and experimentally. But what I noticed when I first got into the industry is just how many false medical claims people are making. Oh, it's a cure-all, it'll cure depression in your goldfish even. And for me as a scientist, that was frustrating because so many false medical claims that they're almost clouding the universe for the consumer of products that you can really trust. And
Hmm.
so my thinking was, okay, I have that very unique background to be able to pull this off, and thought that we developed a product that we basically did double-blind, placebo-controlled clinical trials to see if it worked, and it did work, and it worked in a quite interesting way, actually.
Do explain.
Yeah. So when we first wanted to go down the clinical trial route, there was a lot of different things you could work on. We chose CBD because the government would let us do clinical trials on that.
Yep.
THC
Yeah.
still regulated at the federal level, and
Yeah,
it's.
and as soon as that farm bill came out, what was it, 2018? Towards the end of that, it allowed a lot of that open up, and we've been fighting, not saying
Yes.
like me,
Yeah.
but everybody that has enjoyed cannabis and
Yeah.
the different botanicals over the years, knowing a lot of this stuff, and it's just like, hey, why can't we do the trials to prove the merit behind it? Why we need to reschedule it? Oh, we can't because the federal government doesn't recognize it. So then it's kind of like
Yeah.
chicken, egg, chicken, like, well, how do
Oh,
I
so
get to the,
true.
you know, how do I get
I
to that
mean,
end result
yeah.
if you're not going to allow me to do the research for it? But then it's
Yeah.
always been very controlled, in my opinion.
Yeah,
But
completely. I mean, it was ridiculous, actually, and it's sad because we could have had a lot more products like mine developed during that time. But basically, what happened was that um, we decided to focus on CBD because we could, and then, well, what were people using CBD for? And in general, they would be using it for pain, anxiety, and sleep. In surveys, like that's what I use it for.
yeah.
And so that was one thing. But the second one, which was the real light bulb, is because I'm a scientist, I really studied the clinical trials already that were out there. Um, so CBD, a lot of people don't know this, but it's actually the active ingredient in a drug that was approved by the FDA that same year called Epidiolex. And that drug is approved basically for these children who have very severe forms of epilepsy. So
Hmm.
they're little kids that have seizures that are out of control, and every other drug hasn't worked on it. CBD
Hmm.
works. Some company originally from Britain saw what was going on and decided to like commercialize it.
Yeah, and I think even going back further into the story, I think there was a couple brothers maybe out of Colorado that was linked with the Charlotte Web. I can't think of
That's
their
right.
name off the top of my
Yeah,
head, but they were the ones that really, from my understood, was able to find the plants that would produce the most of that without the THC, and then was putting that in the market and then just showing the tremendous benefits with kids with anybody with epilepsy, just how it
exactly right.
was just night
Exactly
and
right.
day different, but yet, but yeah, but yeah.
Yeah. So some of these big pharma decided, oh, I see an opportunity, but basically, what happened is if you look at those studies where they showed that it helped these kids, um, when they would report what were the adverse effects that were found, the only thing that was found was that it made him sleepy. The parents thought it
Oh,
made him sleepy. So of
sure,
course,
sure.
yeah. So I'm like, okay, maybe it helps for sleep. And so we basically took an agnostic approach. Let's just measure sleep objectively. So what we did was use wrist-worn sleep tracking devices
Okay,
that can
okay.
measure the details of your sleep, and did a double-blind placebo-controlled trial. And what we found was that it has a very unique mechanism of action, CBD. So, almost all sleep medicines, literally like 95% of sleep medicines, are what are called sedatives. So
Hmm.
what they do
Okay.
is they knock you out. So,
Hmm.
it's almost like alcohol or say anesthesia. It's good at putting you
Sure,
down, but
sure.
it actually does not make you sleep better. It's a little dirty secret.
Well, and I've heard most of the stuff like the ambient and stuff like that is good like that as well. It'll put you out, but you're not getting quality sleep.
A
You're not
hundred
waking
percent.
up like
Yeah.
feeling rested.
Yeah, exactly. And so what we found, which was really cool, I thought, was this has to get into the details of how we sleep. But when you sleep, your
Hmm.
brain goes through different sleep stages. They're called sleep cycles.
Hmm.
And basically, first you're awake, then you fall into what's called light sleep, then you transition into what's called deep sleep, and then you transition into what's called REM sleep or dream sleep.
Okay.
And basically, as it turns out, studies scientists have studied this really carefully. Dream sleep and deep sleep are the two stages that are really most important for what's called restorative sleep.
Okay.
And lo and behold, what we found is that CBD, at least in this formulation that we developed, decreases light sleep and it increases deep sleep and REM sleep. So it
Ooh,
shifts the little
okay.
cycling a little. And
Yeah,
so
yeah.
so it doesn't make you fall asleep faster, doesn't necessarily make you stay asleep longer, but what we found is when you're asleep, your brain is spending more time in these restorative sleep stages.
Yeah, yeah. And anecdotal story. I got a friend whose mom's transitioning off of Ambien, and luckily they live in Colorado, so she started transition with CBD type gummies, and her mom just feels so much better from it. And she was telling me about it the other day, how much that has just helped her transition from that, and then just how Mother Nature was doing it better than what Big Pharma could. And
Yeah,
she was
you know
just
what? Yeah,
so surprised about that.
it's so true. It's weird. I don't like this, but I'm just being honest here. That's a really horrible drug. And most sleep doctors do not actually even like prescribing it because of it has serious side effect issues. Things like increased risk of suicide and psychiatric diseases. And, we've all heard the
Oh,
stories of, people taking it and having amnesia and going out and driving their car somewhere and not remembering any of it.
or cooking a dinner, or
Yeah.
I've heard so many wild just sleepwalking stories from people on
Yes.
ambient that it's just like, whoa.
And guess what? This is the other dirty secret. It actually disrupts restorative sleep. So people have looked at this and it actually decreases deep and REM sleep. Now, I'm not saying that Ambien isn't good for some people. There are some people with like super severe insomnia that might only
Mm-hmm.
sleep an hour or two. And for them, just to be able to fall asleep and sleep for 3 hours, say, is better than nothing. But I think for your average person who has struggles with sleep, this is not a good drug. And that's why sleep doctors don't like prescribing it.
I mean, I don't blame you. You can kind of tell already from the brief of our conversation. I'm not a big fan of Big Pharma. I think Big Pharma, just the way they're set up, is profit motive. They want you just well enough to keep you in that hamster field. That's why you don't hear much cures going on. There's no money in cures. They don't want to
Yeah.
put out something that
Yeah.
can cure something, because then they're like, wait a minute, we can't keep charging you. And they do a really good job of keeping you just well enough. And that sounds about the right level of ambient. We'll get you just to sleep well enough, but then we'll go ahead and push this out there to everybody. But I'm sure they've got a couple other prescriptions that will help with all the side effects of Ambien, and then whatever other prescription of the side effects you're going to get from that side effects of that, and
Yeah.
then the side effects. I mean,
You don't even
it
want to get me started. I used to work on Alzheimer's disease,
oh,
and
jeezums.
this is scary. I mean, our government has wasted billions of dollars through pharma on
Mm-hmm.
chasing a small number of ideas that turned out to be completely fraudulent. And
Yeah, I'm
it's
not too
really not
surprised.
pretty.
I'm not too surprised. I'm not too surprised on that. And some of the, yeah, just, oh, just, and the good thing is I think there is an awakening happening since COVID. I think a lot of just even the naysayers are like, oh no, they're doing good. They're starting to see how the system actually works, how they put out false claims, how they claim things are going to be doing this. And it always comes down to like certain margins. Well, if enough people say it is, we'll go ahead and pay off whatever claim that comes up that doesn't work out, and we'll just keep this thing rolling down the road until, to whenever they can't make as much money on it,
Yeah,
but
whenever I
that's,
listen to these commercials, the pharma commercials, and at the end, they have their little disclaimer of like, "Oh, this might make your brain hemorrhage. It might make your liver fall out." Like, I'm like,
oh,
what
it
kind of
it sounds
world
worse
is
than
it?
the actual disease that they're trying to help, or the condition they're
Yeah,
trying to help you. It sounds way worse. It's like, wait a minute, suicidal, all this, and don't take it if you're allergic. Well, how do I know if I'm allergic to it? I
yeah,
mean,
yeah, yeah.
yeah, it's crazy.
If you've never seen, I forget who made it, but there's a really funny video of a proponent of cannabis who made like what are the the dangers of cannabis sort of thing, and it's a really funny commercial because it's like,
I'm
yeah,
sure
you might
seeing
get
it,
a
it
little
sounds
hungry.
yeah, you got little munchies, you're feeling a little
Yeah,
tired, you have a
you might
tendency
feel
not to wanna get
relaxed.
off the couch,
Yeah,
you hope delivery can deliver within a half hour. Yeah, I'm sure it's just wild, but
yeah, yeah,
yeah, and unfortunately, I'm still in the state of Nebraska where we're still fighting that whole fight on we just this last fall got medical to go through, but now we've got state legislator and all them dragging their feet on how they want to regulate it, and they're going to try to drag it all the way out to the end because they just don't want the people to have it, and it's just like, well, who's saying they don't? And it's usually state patrol, private prisons, and big pharma. Those are like the three big culprits that are usually like, "Hey, no, it's so bad. You're going to be letting." And it's like, what is really bad from cannabis? I mean, do we all go out and fight? Because I know when we go to bars and get a certain
yeah,
level of
yeah,
whiskey drunk,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
shit's going to happen. But
yeah,
when we
yeah,
get a certain level of intoxic or high in a sense, we
yeah.
usually don't do nothing. We laugh a lot and we find things funny and we ask a lot of questions.
Have you
I
seen
don't know.
also that with in states that have adopted regulated cannabis, guess what? All these prescriptions are going down, and of course that's why the pharma is,
Hmm.
people are self-medicating effectively, and safely.
And the other industry is getting affected by it is alcohol.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
I mean, they're seeing a lot of those sales going down precipitously with,
Well, that's why
the
they are lobbying so
introduction of.
heavily to take control of it at the federal level, right?
But yes, yeah, and what I'm seeing is some of the states that it has been legal, they're almost getting to the point where they're over-regulating it to where you gotta jump through so many hoops and pay for so many things to even provide it, grow it, or do anything with it, that it makes it to where only a few people can really
Yeah, yeah.
dive in there and deal with all the legal fees, BS that goes with it,
That's
and it's
exactly
kind
what happened here in California.
yeah, I've seen it. I didn't see it firsthand in California, but next to Colorado, I've seen it just slowly just
Yeah,
start to take over, and it's just like, well, this isn't. It's kind of
yeah,
going backwards, guys. Come on, what the hell?
yeah. No,
But
totally.
so what got you into wanting to start your own business and wanting to go down this lane? So you're a scientist. Your buddy
Okay,
kind of says,
yeah,
"Hey, take a look at this. This actually has helped." You started doing studies on it. What pursued you to go? Okay, I want to do this
yeah,
myself. I want to put
yeah.
this out there.
Well, I mean, there was two things. As I loved running a lab and being a professor and having students and all that. That was fun and it was very rewarding. But in the end, there was only a limit of how much of an impact you could have. And I always wanted to do research to help diseases. I didn't want to just do it,
Mm.
to study how the toast falls over or whatever. So I realized that if I'm going to do that, if I'm going to have an impact in that capacity, it would have to be through, clinical trials and doing research in humans. And I'd had a negative experience actually in pharma when I went. So I left
Mm.
academics first to pharma, and so I decided, look, I know how to do this. I had the unique skill set, I thought, to be able to pull it off. Um, having said that, it's been a massive challenge, for me, to learn all the business side of everything because that was not my expertise.
Sure, sure. What was so jumping into the business, what was that, what was the biggest hurdle you had to overcome in your opinion, coming from like the academia scientific side to jump in? Now I need to get
Yeah.
licenses and payroll and employees or
Yeah, I think more than anything is that, my company still is a relatively small startup company, and there's just so many things that have to be taken care of. And, for us, basically I co-founded it with two other people, and, we had a few
very nice.
consultants helping us, but, basically we have to do everything. And so there wasn't any one specific thing that was particularly challenging. I mean, you know, it's funny looking back, like someone would say like, oh, what doing a FDA phase 2 registered trial, that's a huge accomplishment. That would be so hard to do. That part was hard, yes, but actually it's all the other details and fundraising and scaling and that are,
So how many employees
the
you
hard.
guys got now?
Well, we're lucky in a certain sense. We've stayed small because essentially we used to do our own manufacturing, but now we
Okay.
outsource that. We partner with another company for that. And so we have, I think we maybe like 6 people.
Okay, okay. So when you started out, you guys were doing like, were you growing your own plants and everything from, start to finish when you first started?
Originally, yes. So we didn't
Okay.
grow our own plants, but we actually had friends that were farmers in Mendocino County that we worked with. And so we'd go up and get plants, harvest the plants, extract the plants, purify the cannabinoids, the whole thing.
So you guys went through that whole process of the whole extraction and
Oh
everything
yeah.
and
Oh
doing
yeah.
that all yourself.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And then
So, and then,
yeah.
yeah, go
Yeah,
ahead.
and then eventually you know, so what we realized is that I mentioned these terpene molecules before, right? And we haven't talked
Hmm.
about that, but I think that's actually an important part of our story, at least. Um, in plants and all plants, there's these molecules called terpenes. We take them in our diet every day if you eat fruits and vegetables. And they're little molecules that basically are kind of related to cannabinoids and also, we think, have important biological activities, meaning they can affect your brain and your immune system and all sorts of
Mm,
things. And
yeah.
and so we got interested in those because there was pretty strong evidence already that some of these terpenes might promote sleep based on animal studies. And so, we wanted to test that in humans. So that's exactly what we did. We isolated these terpenes and we basically reintroduced them into this novel formulation and, very carefully looked at the dosing and just
Yeah.
years of work to get to there. But before we found, a final recipe that has the right amount of terpene at the right concentration and that works well, and at least works well for most people.
Oh, I hear you there. And I mean, most small business owners will agree. It's always a lot of trial and error on everything. Once you go in with a certain plan and an idea, and then life
Well,
happens on life
yeah.
terms and you got to change, you got to
Oh,
adapt.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
I
And
mean, and it sounds
yeah.
like you've had to do that quite a bit
Oh,
and even
yeah.
trying to scale
Yeah.
it. I'm assuming there was
Yeah, so
some,
we're in the scaling process right now, and I have to say that I should have mentioned this, but the other biggest challenge is basically a lack of regulation on it, right? I mean, so you know, essentially, FDA passes CBD as a drug for these kids with
Mhm.
epilepsy, but Farm Bill passes at the same time. Obviously, people were using CBD and cannabinoids before any of that big pharma came in.
Sure,
And
sure,
so
sure.
so they more or less allowed interstate commerce, but they never regulated it. And then so, and essentially, that's problematic because, for example, for other type of businesses, like I'm not allowed to advertise,
Hmm.
on certain platforms and these are the main platform. I can't sell it on Amazon, for what reason? Uh no good
No,
reason.
no. I know exactly what you're talking about. We're in the kratom industry. You ever heard of kratom?
Yes, yeah,
The
yeah.
plant? Yep.
Yeah.
And we've had to be very careful on that and do our things like. But I know exactly what you're talking about because when I first started this up back in 2016, 2015, we were getting kicked off all these platforms. You can't even mention this. What are you doing? Get out of here. And then
Yeah.
merchant accounts would, oh, what? You can't process a credit card. You can't sell it on here. And it's like, well, why? Well, because well, it's not
There's a risk.
illegal.
There's a risk.
Oh,
What
well,
risk?
it's a gray area and there's a risk we don't want
It's
to
a
say.
gray area.
What risk? It's a natural. Well, and then it's just because we say so is basically what it comes down to. They walk
It's
around
so
that for a little while.
frustrating. A product like Define Sleep, there's no reason it shouldn't be carried on at Walgreens and CVS and things and these
Hundred
pharmacy
percent.
chains. There's a million other vitamins and nutraceuticals, many of which aren't
Mm-hmm.
aren't even safe that they carry. But they're like, well, the government hasn't regulated. Oh, we don't know enough about its safety. I'm like, we studied the safety very carefully, and we know a lot about its safety, and it's
Mm-hmm.
completely safer than product XYZ on your shelf right now.
And then they tend to get that way about natural botanicals in general, not just with Canada. I mean,
Yeah,
there's a lot of them out there. They don't want to stick their toe in the water because the big reason is they can't patent it. They can't formulate it to where one company can make,
yeah.
a singular profit off it to where, they can charge royalties. It's like, well, it's Mother Nature. Anybody could grow it in their backyard or they can go down to their local farmer and get this. And that's just I guess, my warped opinion on it. I always think that there's a profit motive behind
Well, of
them.
course
Like,
there.
well, no, we don't want to give it out to the masses. That would lose us. tens of
Well,
millions, if not billions of dollars, you know?
and here's the thing that I think your average consumer wouldn't necessarily know. Up until around the 50s, the 1950s, almost every single drug that we had was a plant-derived molecule. Like the
Mhm.
vast majority, where they found that this plant had some certain effect and they figured out which molecules in
Hmm.
there, they went forward and eventually became drugs. And it was only at that point that people started synthesizing their own novel forms of molecules, such like you could get patents and things, just like you're saying, you know. But historically, almost all our drugs are plant based.
Yeah. Well, and from my understanding of it, and I could be a bit off, but it was Rockefeller's teaching, and then the American Medical Association that was formed after it kind of coalesced everybody into that funnel because it was easier to control. And Rockefeller was really big on pharmacology of like, how can we patent this? How we got all this stuff out here? How can we get a singular profit off it? And I think they pushed, in my opinion, a lot of like the American medical journals and everything away from holistic healing because it's been like a slow walkway since about the 50s, in my
Well,
opinion.
think about the opioid epidemic, right?
Oh, jeezums. Yeah, I mean, that's the big reason I got into Kratom in the first place back in 2015. Buddy of mine came to me and was like, hey, I was over in Iraq, I got injured, but I found, I was over in Thailand and Indonesia, and they showed me this plant, and it was helping with my back problems. Gets back here and wants to start a company importing that in. And I was like, start doing the research on it. I'm like, oh, this helps out a lot with opioid addiction. It helps a lot with people with addiction, period, because it's a natural way. There's the way it binds to the receptors. There's no real permanent damage or anything beyond that. It body processes it naturally. So it's very, very, very hard to overdose on this, but
Hmm.
it helps a lot of people transition from an opioid to alcoholics to most drug addicts into a safer form to walk away from this in
Hmm.
a sense. John Hopkins even did a study on kratom a while back, and it showed it was no more addictive than, herbal tea out
Yeah,
there.
yeah, yeah,
But the
yeah.
way you hear the FDA and big pharma talk about it, it's a scourge and a demon on the society. But
Yeah.
that's how they classify a lot of things. They said the same thing about cannabis for a number of years,
Oh
and
my God.
it's
And
just
then,
done
yeah,
more good than harm, in my opinion. But I also can recognize that, like, kind of what you're saying. Part of me, my anarchist part of me, is like, no, we don't need any regulation. But there's the other part of me that I don't like what they're doing with the concentrates. I don't like the vapes and how the kids are getting a hold of that and the
yeah,
levels and concentrates in there. Okay, I'll step up and say, yeah, we might need to take a look on that. It's not the,
yeah,
back
yeah.
in the day, your average flower or anything else. It's some of the levels in there. Well, it could do something to a young developing mind type
There's no
situation.
question about that. And look, no one likes regulation, right? I mean, who does? It's bureaucratic headache. But having said that, like there are issues that can arise, and so for me, I mean, for a while I was actually helping with an organization called National Cannabis Industry Association in terms of like lobbying efforts for sensible regulation based on sound science and things like that.
Mm,
And,
yeah.
but it's an uphill battle, and
Hmm.
so I don't know how it will pan out, if it does pan out, but no regulations is also tough. So, I mean, but in some ways, it's let's just say that things are easier when there was no regulations. But
Sure,
well,
sure. And I mean, there's a part of me where if you're doing harm, then yeah, government step in. But, outside of it, as long
yeah,
as what you're saying is it was on the product, you should be able
yeah,
to go out
yeah.
and sell it. But, I'm all for it because I know even in our industry, and I know a lot of others, they're sneaking, well, especially in illegal drugs, they're putting fentanyl, and they're sneaking
Oh yeah,
fentanyl and
yeah,
other
yeah,
stuff in there, which is making it worse and putting bad names on us.
yeah,
And
yeah, yeah, yeah. No,
it's,
totally.
yeah,
There's
and
there's
yeah.
also issues, like you said, with the high dose and things, and I know like some younger kids who are like super into dabbing, massive
Mm-hmm.
quantities of
Oh, I've seen it.
oils, and that I mean that's not. I hate to say it, but you're right that there's high risk for negative consequences if you do that, especially when your brain's developing.
Yeah, I've seen some of these kids and the amounts they're dabbing. I'm sitting there with my jaw on the floor, like, why? You're gonna be a zombie like on the couch for the next 5 hours. I'm gonna come over and poke you every hour, just make sure you're okay.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
but to each their own, and you
yeah,
know,
yeah.
I get it. You don't know what the wrong road is until you go down it, and you go, "Oh shit, I shouldn't have gone down this road." Okay,
There's
now we know.
also one other area where more and more people are getting interested in isolating and selling, commercializing other cannabinoids, you know, CBG,
Mm-hmm.
CBN, all these others,
Oh yeah.
Delta 8. And what one scenario that could play out easily is that some of these might like have different activities or be highly far more potent at, like, you know, triggering intoxication, for example,
Oh yeah.
or certain. And so, and that's the concern there, because if there's no regulation, there's going to be commercial interest just driven by profit to, like, oh, I'm going to be the guy with the new cannabinoid, you know?
Well, I mean, we've already, in my opinion, we've kind of already seen that in essence. If we go back to like the tobacco industry, as soon as we started really regulating the tobacco industry, what they do? They went and bought up processed foods like Kraft and all that. How do we make this more addictive? How do we get people, you know, how can we put chemicals in this to make people just so sensational they can't stop eating it? And now we're looking around at the obesity epidemic of just processed food and just bad eating, because that's kind of where these guys got pushed off into. But I'm coming back to that, well, we kind of need someone there, because I don't like Delta 8 myself. Most of the
Yeah,
stories and the things I've heard off of it, it's just, and we're seeing it even in the kratom industry. They're starting to synthesize some of the other stuff out of there, like with 7-HO, which then it's like, well, I don't know. Once you start doing stuff to the molecule outside of what Mother Nature was doing, in my
yeah,
opinion, it adds a lot of risk that we're not unsure. It's going to take a guy like you and several years of research to say,
yeah,
hey, this is where it's at, and this is what we should
yeah.
be doing.
Yeah, it's just safety concerns, you know, because when people are taking in molecules at doses that no one has ever done before, you just don't know, you know. So it's just basically self-experimentation.
Oh
You know,
yeah.
luckily we haven't had any nightmares yet about this, but you
No,
know,
yeah, I've had some employees, because we're always kind of looking for different botanicals. And I had this one guy worked for me for a little while, and he was finding weird shit from China and then getting it shipped here. And he goes, "No, I'm gonna try this," and it's like fake Xanax or these fake benzos or this up and this down. And I would just look at him like, "What are you doing?
gee,
You're what? You don't even know what the hell that." And especially coming from China. Come
yeah,
on, man! Like, what
yeah,
is? Needless to say, he didn't stick around too much longer, because after that, I was just like, no, I can't have you in this culture, man.
yeah.
You're
I
too
think some
much,
people are
man.
just like risk, I guess.
They're just wired to experience. I mean, but you
Yeah,
think of like how a lot of humanity came across all this. It's just people sitting around like, should I try this? Should I try that? Let me try this mushroom. Oh, Bob fell over and died. Okay, don't eat that one. Let's go over and try. I gotta imagine just the entirety of human history has just been that way. We're just at a point where we've got enough back knowledge that, hey, we kind of know what not to try in this
yeah,
anymore, and we got better methods of doing it. Here, just try this, see what happens.
yeah.
Okay. uh, well, we're kind of getting to that point. Can people find what you're doing? Or let's take a step back and go, are you only selling in the states that you're in, or can you go
No, no.
interstate wise,
Yeah,
or
yeah.
how
So you can find our product online at definedsleep.com. And basically, we ship to anywhere in the US. And, you know, you place an order, it's there within a day or two. You know, you can either just have a single purchase or get on subscription, depending on the level of help you're seeking in terms of your poor
sure.
sleep. And we have lots of different subscription models, so not everyone takes the same amount. We totally highly recommend people, you know, do some dosing to see what helps for them. One of the things I didn't mention, but our product's a much higher dose of CBD than your average product. It contains 300 milligrams, and the reason it has 300 milligrams because that's what we tested and found was what the kind of minimum amount that you really need to have an effect on sleep for most people. So
Sure, sure. And I'm
yeah,
assuming, is it more of a, because I know there's a difference between like full spectrum
yeah,
and
yeah.
like just isolate. I'm assuming you guys are using more of the full spectrum, or are you
No,
isolating a
actually,
certain cannabinoid?
we believe in full spectrum, very much so because of the terpenes, right? And we believe the
Mm-hmm.
terpenes are
Mm-hmm.
important. But the problem with full spectrum for me as a scientist is every crop, each cycle grows differently, and the spectrum is different
Yep.
every time. And
Yep.
so we, as a scientist, I don't like that the spectrum changes, just like wines change from year to year. So
Oh
what we're
yeah.
doing is basically playing engineer, and we take the terpenes out, so it's full spectrum, and that it's a complex terpene CBD mixture.
Sure, sure.
But
But you're more
we purify it and putting the pieces back together so that
okay.
basically so that the product is the exact same every time, and so it works the same every time. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. No, with our products, I always say, Mother Nature doesn't make the leaf different. I mean, anybody who's also dabbled in cannabis over the years knows that, or should I say, have grown cannabis. You can literally take buds from the same plant at different point, and they're going to have different tastes, different levels of terpenes, different levels
Totally.
of THC in there. It's not all going to be the same.
Yeah.
And same
Yeah.
with ours, in Mother Nature, it's like, yeah, we get a grounded up powder, but there's some crops that weren't as strong or didn't have as much. So what we've learned to do is we make our own in-house extract to add that certain level, which
Yeah.
and it's similar to what you guys are doing.
Yeah.
You're pulling it
Yeah.
all out and saying, "Hey, we've got the exact
Yeah.
amounts. We're going to put it all back in together, so we
Yeah.
know each time it's going to be this
Yeah.
level, no matter what."
Yeah. And I should have said also that we were serious about the science, and we published our clinical trial in a peer-reviewed, high-level scientific
Nice.
journal. And so at this point, doctors are very comfortable with recommending our product to their patients. And so, we encourage doctors to take a look at our study, and see what they determine for themselves. But, I think one of the things with viewing these things as medicines is that the medical community has stayed away historically because they weren't taught about it in medical school and things like
Yep.
this.
Yep.
And so they themselves need to be educated. And whenever I talk to a sleep doctor, they're like, God, I can't believe someone finally did a clinical trial like this.
Mm-hmm. And I'm assuming most of that stuff could be found on like your website. So if
Yes,
someone
yes,
wanted
it's
to
all
like
there.
go to
Yep.
your website to find
Yeah.
sleep, they could
Yeah.
find that and go through it themselves, and even take it to their doctor and say, "Hey, see what this is."
We also sell our product in a sample size because you know like most things, not everything works for everyone, and we admit that. We know that, and actually, we know exactly what percentage of people it works in for us from our clinical studies, and it's
Oh,
actually much
nice.
higher than your average thing. Like if you buy like a allergy medicine, some of those only work in like 40% of people.
Sure, sure. Well, and I mean, everybody's so different. I mean, just there's not a one size fits all type
Yeah.
situation for anybody.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
it's
So
very
so we
different.
always recommend if you're don't want to buy a whole month supply, just buy a sample and try it for the week and see if it works for you. The other thing is now everyone's using these sleep tracking, Fitbit or
Mm-hmm.
Whoop,
Well, the
Apple
Apple
Watch.
Watches,
Yep.
yeah,
Yeah,
that.
and so we highly encourage to look at that, use those to see if it's working because sometimes you can't feel it's subtle, like you don't get high or anything, right? It's not
No, no,
intoxicating,
yeah,
doesn't knock you
100%.
out. So the only thing people really report sort of subjectively is that they feel calmer, they feel more relaxed.
Okay. So
But
it's kind of a settle for some,
yeah,
but it could be
yeah,
very drastic for others.
yeah, yeah. And the other thing we found is some people one capsule's enough. For some people that I have some friends a little more on the hyperactive spectrum,
Mhm.
they need two or three, and that's what works for them. So it's perfectly safe to take higher or lower doses of
Oh,
this
sure.
product. So yeah,
Yeah, I had the same thing with our product. I had a sales gal that she was probably about 140, a little thing, and she would take 20 capsules to get to a certain level that she was looking for. And then I had one of my buddies who was a bodybuilder, and he was 320, half fat, half solid muscle. He would take two capsules and be like, "I'm good. I'm feeling great. I'm feeling energized." And I'm like, "Wait a minute. It doesn't,
yeah.
everybody's different. Everybody's,
Everybody's different.
biology's made up just
Everybody's
slightly
different.
different.
Yeah,
And you
yeah.
just never know until you dip your toe in there what the water's going to feel like."
Yeah. Oh, and one last thing.
Sure.
If you go to the website and you're interested in it, use my name's Paul Muchowski. Use Paul's 30 as a discount code, and then you get a really good discount on the product.
Okay. Paul, what, 30 you said?
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
30?
Paul 30.
Paul 30. Okay, Paul
Yeah.
30. Well, Paul, I appreciate you coming on. This is a great conversation. I have a feeling me and you could probably go for a couple hours
Yeah.
with this subject and go back and forth. But I try to keep my episodes between a certain time
Yeah.
level just so
Yeah.
people will stay engaged and interested. But hey, if you guys are really interested, go check out his website. Use Paul 30. Get some of them sample kits. I know I personally I approve and have used CBD over the years, especially in that setting for sleep. It does wonders if you're having trouble, or for like some small business owners like us, you just can't shut your brain off at night and you're
Yes.
thinking, oh, did I do this? I got to do this. Did I get this done?
Yeah.
Sometimes
Yeah.
it's helpful just to take
Yeah. No, I
a little bit
agree. I
of that
agree.
and just actually let the brain shut off for a night, you know?
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
So, well,
It's funny. People ask me a lot, like, do I take it? I'm like, well, I don't really typically struggle with insomnia, but for me, what will happen is like, I'll have a particularly like stressful or hectic week where just so much going on that, like you said, like my mind can't like shut down. And so I'll take it on those nights, and I'll also take it when I travel because it's really good for jet lag.
yeah, oh yeah. Yeah, different time zones and traveling will
Yeah,
just beat it out of you, especially if you're going a couple time zones away. It'll mess with your sleep. We're
big
kind of
time.
creatures of habit in a little bit when it comes to that. So if you that helps out a lot. I definitely would recommend that for traveling as well. So all right,
Well,
Paul. Well, thanks for meeting up with us and coming on my podcast, and we'll check you out on the other
all
side.
right, great. It was a real pleasure, and thank you for having me.
No problem. All right, guys. We'll see you
All right.
later. This has been The Inspiring Minds with Blissful Botanicals. I hope you enjoyed this episode. To find any of our great products, log on to blissfulbotanicals.shop. I hope to see you again soon. Eyes open, no fear. I'm your host, J.R. Knopp.